All right, welcome everybody to the Jim Acosta Show. It is Thursday. I like to call it Friday Eve. That means we're just getting the party started. Giridharadas is with us. He's back on the program. Anand, great to see you again. And I just want to jump right into this because this news on Harvard, I think, is hitting everybody like a two by four. I mean, Trump's war on his perceived enemies continues. He campaigned on revenge and retribution. He's delivering on that promise. Today, it's academia. New York Times reporting that the Trump administration halted Harvard's ability to enroll international students, taking aim at a crucial funding source for Harvard. And Reuters is reporting this. This is a wrinkle to it that I think is very disturbing. The administration is forcing existing students, this is according to Reuters, to transfer to other schools or lose their legal status. This is according to the Department of Homeland Security. And now we should just jump right into this. I mean, this is what Trump is doing. This is part of his campaign of retribution and revenge. It's also about trying to make people afraid, put fear in people's hearts. What's your take on all of this?
Well, a few things. I mean, first of all, you're right. This is, we talk about Trump as an authoritarian. People throw around, as I have for some time now, words like fascist. But he's doing a range of things, and his
Yeah.
his budget is one thing, and Doge is another thing. When you talk about going after one specific university
Yes.
and revoking or threatening to revoke visas for students at that one university because that university didn't comply with you, and doing it not for people going forward, but so that people now in that university might be thrown out or arrested or whatever. That is authoritarianism. So if you are one of these people
Yeah.
who's like, well, Jim's using that word too much, or Anand's using that word too much, or Ruth Ben Giat and Michael
Yeah.
Cohen, whoever else is using that word too much. Well, here is something that is hard to think about happening.
Yeah.
Can you just think about a moment where any American president has had any policy with regard to one specific university of any kind of policy,
That's
right?
right.
So just that this is what authoritarianism looks like. Your family comes from Cuba. This is the kind of thing that is common in places like Cuba or North
Absolutely.
Korea, not common here.
And,
The
and,
other
I,
thing
and I
that,
want to jump in and say, to hell with these people who are poo-pooing the idea, shitting all over the idea that this is authoritarianism. Up yours. I'm sorry.
yeah,
This is what Donald Trump is doing. He's going after Harvard. A federal judge apparently has just blocked the administration from terminating the legal statuses of international students at universities across the U.S. We'll see if that affects or impacts the Harvard situation. But I didn't mean to interrupt. But that's what this is. You're absolutely right.
the specificity, the kind of
Yeah.
personal thing, I will say I am in this country because my father actually left India to go to Harvard as an international student.
Wow.
So to think about, by the way, he came here because of currency restrictions at the time with $7 in his pocket because India didn't allow you to take more money than that. Um,
Wow.
could you imagine people in those kinds of situations? Harvard, at one level, you think about Harvard, you think about a very privileged place. You think about, people who maybe you don't need to worry about and cry over the way you might people for whom Medicaid is being cut, for example.
Yeah.
However, it is worth noting that when you think of international students at Harvard, there's a certain special role they play, which is that it, Harvard educates a lot of people from other countries who sometimes stay here and sometimes go back to those countries and play really important roles there, right? So if you
Absolutely.
think about the most promising scientists from Sierra Leone, right? Who I mean, I knew someone like this when I was in grad school there. A guy. This guy was at MIT, but he, um, you know, brilliant young scientist from Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone, the Civil War, lots of people lost their limbs. This guy was like, I'm going to invent a new kind of prosthetic limb
Wow.
because my country's full of people who need this. Now, sadly, he couldn't stay in Sierra Leone and solve that. He needed to have access to the labs and technologies of the most sophisticated universities in the world to solve a problem like lots of limbless people in Sierra Leone. So he
Yeah.
came lived in Cambridge, was at MIT, involved in these kinds of programs, goes back and does that, right? There are people who are in parliament in countries around the world, in countries that are maybe have illiberal tendencies. They come here, they read Plato, and they go back to their country, sometimes
Correct.
get it, that. So there's this disproportionate role. It's not, just thinking about like rich kids or eating clubs or whatever. There is, when it comes to international students, you think about the Chinese send a lot of
A
international
lot of
students
students.
to Harvard.
Absolutely.
Now that's an authoritarian country that's been really hard to crack with liberal ideas. Well, you have lots and lots of the Chinese elite coming
Yeah.
here, and they're reading certain
They're
books that
exposed to freedom. They're
right.
exposed to democracy. And then they
And
go
so
back and they take those lessons back.
and
Not a
we have
bad
lots of
idea.
examples of
Yeah,
that. We have lots of world leaders who've kind of had that experience.
that's
So
right.
it's worth understanding what's being done. But I will say a third thing, and I don't say this to build up President Trump at all. In a way, it's the biggest indictment. But he does have something that a lot of people on the political left lack, which is an actually shrewd understanding of the leverage points and pressure points of the American power elite. In a way, it's
Yes,
so insightful to go right at that thing of Harvard's international students, right? If you want
that's
to
right.
even scare not just the American power elite, if you want to scare the leadership of China, you cut off the ability of rich and powerful Chinese people to send their kids to Harvard specifically. Like,
Yeah,
it is a great example of a really, in a way, small scale act on the grand scheme of the country that has this huge, huge demonstration effect.
yeah,
And so we need to understand his understanding of the power of symbolism and how he's working on these levels. And look,
yeah.
we need people to wake up and start fighting this stuff as the authoritarianism it is.
Yeah, and it's time for college students to wake up, and obviously part of why the Trump administration is doing this, part of why Trump is doing this, people like Stephen Miller, they're trying to intimidate kids on college campuses to not go out and speak their minds. These students need to understand that they are being challenged and bullied into silence, and they should not abide by that. It is time for an awakening, a reawakening on the college campuses to do some acts of civil disobedience, and I hope that we see that here in the coming weeks. Do it peacefully, do it respectfully, but make your voices heard. Don't be quiet. Don't be bullied into silence. But I mean, Anand, you're absolutely right. And the other thing that comes to mind, and I've been thinking about this for some time, is it's clear in what Trump has been doing in this campaign of revenge and retribution. He thought about this while he was out of power. He thought about the targets he wanted to go after, and academia is one of those targets. And people like Stephen Miller and some of the people who work behind the scenes, they've clearly been crafting these kinds of areas of attack to bully and intimidate areas where they know that there could be trouble for the administration when they try to carry out this authoritarian agenda. It seems like that's part of what we're seeing play out as well.
I mean, the ridiculous asymmetry of American politics right now, and you've covered
Yeah.
this long enough to know this intimately, is that the people who would wage war on our own people and our own institutions and our own ideals are unembarrassed about doing so.
Yeah.
And those who are actually want to help people and want to do good things for people are like shy about their own power and shy about, well, is that too far? Or, well, is that the right procedure? And so we're in this asymmetry where the people with good hearts who want to help people tie their own hands behind their back because they're not sure if it's been triple checked and fact checked and
Yeah.
all the lawyers at 52 agencies have approved, and the people who want to wreak havoc and
Yeah.
slash Medicaid and gut food stamps
Yeah.
have
And I do
no
want to get into
have
that.
have no fear, no imposter syndrome at all.
And I do want to get into that. The flip side of this, though, is, and I talked about this with Ruth Ben Ghiat the other day, is that coupled with the slow creeping authoritarianism is the corruption. That is what you see in these kinds of regimes around the world, and that Trump is marching us in that direction. And tonight he's going to host this exclusive dinner at his golf club outside of Washington and Virginia. 220 of the largest investors in his meme coin are going to have this private audience with the president. A lot of these people bought these meme coins, made these investments on foreign exchanges and so on. And so, I mean, you can ask, you know, you want to raise questions about the Chinese sending their kids to Harvard. What the hell's going on with Trump meme coin purchases and the way they're being purchased around the world. But I mean, Anand, that to me is one of the hallmarks of what Trump is trying to do in this country right now is just this corruption that just seems this corruption racket that seems to have no end. Whether it's the Qataris with the plane, and this crypto stuff, he's just doing it brazenly out in the open.
You're a good friend of mine, Ruth Ben Giat, and I had this conversation a few weeks ago
Yeah,
also. And one of the things that came out of it was, and really helped clarify my thinking on this, is that, you know, authoritarianism enables corruption,
yeah,
which is sort of obvious, but it works the other way around too. Corruption is part of establishing the authoritarian project, which is less obvious, which is to say, if I come home from work every day and kind of piss on your lawn, I'm demonstrating, and if nothing happens to me the first day, the second day, you don't do anything, you're too scared. Part of the power becomes the act, right? So the status allows the act, but the act entrenches the status. And so he is not just profiting from his authoritarian attempt, but he is using flagrant instances of theft. Unnecessary. You don't need to take this plane. It's so dumb. You don't
yeah,
need to do the meme coin. I mean, even he doesn't need the money in
yeah,
in any kind of narrow sense. I'm not even sure it's actually for the money. I think it is about something actually much more dangerous, which is demonstrating and flexing impunity. And the fact that it gets
yeah.
him rich also, he likes that.
I
But
know.
it
I like that. I like that interpretation. I mean, I also talk about this with Ruth, and I also think it's about building out a corporate oligarchy, in this country that will insulate and protect them and make it more difficult to dislodge them from power. I mean, I do worry about that too. But I
Well,
think
but
your
the
point is
worse you
very
treat
perceptive.
people,
Yeah,
the worse you treat people
yeah,
as a leader, surely you imagine in your head, no matter how powerful you are, how it could end. Surely
yeah,
it runs through your head these pictures that we all know from history, right? Your family would have known it from Cuba in the
yeah,
50s of a leader fleeing in the middle of the night, of a helicopter taking off, of not knowing where Ashraf Ghani is, or not knowing where leaders in Iraq or Vietnam are, right?
yeah,
Um, Surely, if you're a Putin or an Erdogan or a Trump or an Assad in Syria, surely it's on your mind that given how you have treated people, if you
yeah,
don't cling to power, and if you don't have billions of dollars and lots of, maybe your own plane, that it could end badly for you. And so it's this strange thing where the more power you kind of amass and then use it to abuse people, the more the more of an anxiety of power you actually have. Right?
yeah,
If you think of an Obama or a George H.W. Bush, I don't think they were like afraid the terrible, terrible thing that was going to end terribly for them, that would end
yeah,
in mayhem and violence.
yeah,
But if you live the way Donald Trump has, or Putin has, or Erdogan has, it probably occurs to you that if you don't amass a kind of war chest of money and planes and cronies and places you could hide and land somewhere that some billionaire will stash you on,
yeah.
it could end really badly for you because that you fear the tables turning.
Yeah, yeah, he doesn't want to end up like Saddam Hussein in the spider hole, I guess. Is that what happened to Saddam? Yeah, and we have to jump to this, Saddam, because you brought it up a couple times. I mean, Trump wants to sign into law what could be the largest transfer of wealth in American history. The Atlantic writes that House Republicans worked through the night to advance a massive piece of legislation that might, if enacted, carry out the largest upward transfer of wealth in American history. I do think that is something that people should be focused on. This idea that they're going to give these huge tax breaks to the wealthy and to corporations, and meanwhile, they're going to do a reverse Obamacare. They're going to strip millions of people of their health care. Forget about the old days during the first Trump administration where they tried in vain to kill Obamacare, and then John McCain came out and gave the thumbs down. They're going to do this in a slow creeping kind of way where they're just going to make it impossible to fund these programs because they've given so much money away to their buddies via tax cuts.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about this is, you and I know that Donald Trump doesn't respect you and me. He doesn't respect what
No,
we do. He
yeah,
thinks we're enemies of the people. Fine, I have no
yeah,
problem. Um, what's interesting and revealed by this budget is that he deeply disrespects his own voters. His
so
voters
true.
disproportionately live in rural America. if any of you are watching this, you, his voters, disproportionately live in rural America. You know, therefore, that Medicaid, for example, holds up so much of the infrastructure of rural healthcare in this country, rural hospitals in this country,
Big
right?
time.
He
A
doesn't
huge part of
respect.
Obamacare. Yeah.
He doesn't respect you. He doesn't respect. Forget whether he respects Jim and me. He doesn't respect his own voters, and he
Yeah.
is gambling his presidency and his life on the idea that his supporters are stupid. And I actually don't believe they're stupid. He thinks they're stupid. I
Yeah.
actually don't believe they're stupid.
No, I agree.
He's lost a bunch of them already. I think people rolled the dice with him. I think people are not ready to have airplanes stolen from the Pentagon. I don't think people are ready to have their VA benefits imperiled. I don't think they're
Yeah.
ready to have their rural hospitals taken out. I actually think there's some Christians in this country who may not rely on food stamps themselves, who actually don't like the idea of food stamps being taken from others because they actually cracked open their Bible more than once.
Yeah.
Um, I
True.
I would not bet on the stupidity of Trump's voters the way Trump seems to bet on the stupidity of his voters.
Yeah, I was with him in 2016 after the Nevada caucus when he said, "I love low information voters." I mean, he literally said that, and he is counting on that. You're absolutely right. That's a very good insight. And I've said on this program a million times, and people who watch and listen are going to say, "Okay, Jim said this before," but every Trump rally is within 5 miles of a Walmart. It's almost you can almost bet money on it that that's the case. Those folks who shop at those Walmarts, because as we all know, Walmart has cleaned out the downtowns of so many towns in America. Those folks are going to feel the impact of the tariffs and of the mass deportation roundups and so on. The other aspect of this is, and I've been to these rallies and seen a lot of elderly people. I mean, Trump's base is very much in the senior citizen demographic, and those folks are going to possibly feel Medicare cuts. I mean, he promised time again not to touch Medicare. It depends on how this thing is scored ultimately when it comes out of the Senate, but there may be sequestration mechanisms that go into effect that result in Medicare being cut back. And we know Medicaid, a lot of folks out there may not understand the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. Medicaid, which is the healthcare program for the poor, is going to be facing major cuts. And you're absolutely right. Rural hospitals depend on Medicaid to stay alive in so many different parts of the country, in a lot of red states, big time.
Here are, in a way, the two interlocking tragedies or ironies or ironic tragedies of this Trump presidency. Um, he is to be given some credit for identifying areas of American life where there was a kind of elite consensus on not telling people the truth. I think trade is an area where you could say that's the case. I think government efficiency is an area where you could say that's the case. I
Yeah.
think foreign aid is an area where you could say that's the case. The first part of that tragedy is having identified those areas and built some support by saying things about those things that no one else would say. He entered those areas and just made all of them worse and made people's lives harder in the way he went about it. The second related tragedy is that he's a populist, wannabe populist, calls himself populist, kind of falls into the tradition of populism around the world, who has quite uniquely pursued and focused on incredibly unpopular things in these
Yeah.
first 4 months. And that really strikes me as quite interesting and different. If you think about Narendra Modi in India or others, there's at least an attempt to say, look, I'm trying this authoritarian thing. I'm tough in all these ways. I'm going to do a bunch of stuff that people love, that they see in their town. Narendra Modi's
Yeah.
doing like village cleanups in India, clean the toilets. People are like, wow, this country's like finally looking a little clean. They give him a little space
Yeah.
to do some bad shit. Well, this guy, it's just fascinating. He's doing a form of authoritarianism that goes after the portfolios of his own supporters,
Yeah.
that threatens the cheap goods that they get from those Walmarts. Walmart alone, the company of Walmart's trade with China alone is more than most countries trade with China,
It's so
right?
true. It's true. That's right.
Right? Like so he
Yeah.
goes after their ability to buy stuff at Walmart. He's going after their VA benefits, right? I don't saving grace is not quite the right term here, but I do
Yeah.
think at some level we may be spared the worst kind of history authoritarianisms we've seen in history because this guy's so bad at it.
He's bad at it. And the other thing too is in this big beautiful blunder of a bill, he will say, "Oh well, we got no tax on tips and that sort of thing." If you look at the no tax on tips policy, okay, there might be some servers at restaurants who benefit, but the dishwashers don't. The guys in the kitchen cooking the food don't. They're worried about getting rounded up by ICE agents and masks, and so his program picks winners and losers, and that is such a Trump tell. And the other thing is, I mean, I've often thought he's not a very good poker player because yesterday he picks a fight with the South African president, a race baiting fight with the South African president because he knows that's what's going to penetrate on the evening newscast. And that's what's going to penetrate on the cable newscast, not this you and I dissecting this mega bill that is basically a giveaway to the rich on the backs of the poor and on the backs of Trump supporters.
But he's doing in that way. He is absolutely tapping into something that will be red meat for or white meat for some of his base. But he's making a fundamental error, which is that if
Yeah.
you look at how people have voted in the last several elections, there has been a repeated uh, rejection of people and parties and leaders who seemed consumed by a bunch of things that seemed really remote from what was going on in people's lives.
Yep.
Sometimes that hurt Republicans, sometimes that's hurt Democrats, right? Um, and having actually won an election because Democrats were perceived as being a little out of touch with some of those lived realities and getting into issues that were like 8 steps away from those things, with some truth to that critique. Um, he's now doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Who is this
Exactly.
for? Like Tim Walz asked us in the last campaign, like, who's this stuff for?
I don't know. I don't know. A lot of it is to provide cover, I think, for the corrupt authoritarianism. I think that's he designs this stuff and then he comes up with these gimmicks like the border wall, the no tax on tips, because it sounds good in a soundbite, it looks good on a bumper sticker, but it's cover for the ultimate goal, which is to push America into a place that it has never been before and to
Yeah.
become a place it has never been before. I do want to get into some of the things you've been writing about on Substack, Anon, because I think it's so smart. It sounds like you want some more self-examination and self-reflection from Democrats, which they said they were going to do, but they haven't really done. And you wrote, after once was heralded as a wake-up call, I saw instead in so many quarters human qualities that make reckoning all but impossible: defensiveness and curiosity, touchiness, the inability to see oneself as others see you, certitude in the name of so-called moral clarity, smugness, condescension, blame casting, deflection, and a total rejection of introspection. Anon, don't beat around the bush here. Get right to it. What are you saying here?
This is why I became a writer. Look, it occurred to me a couple weeks ago. I was actually on a long flight back from London, where Tina Brown had this journalism summit, and just thinking about the summit and these conversations I'd had among a bunch of journalistic leaders. And on the flight back, I realized it's been exactly 6 months that week. It was exactly 6 months since Trump's victory. And that
Yeah,
got me thinking, okay, 6 months ago, where were we all? And I remember it suddenly came back to me that week, that month, there was suddenly, okay, well, this is a terrible, people were in a funk. And then after the funk, there was like, okay, we got to rethink some things.
yeah,
This Democratic Party's got to rethink itself. I heard a lot of your and my friends in the media say, we in the media are missing big parts of reality. We got to figure out how to cover this guy better than we covered him the first time. There
yeah,
were so many promises in those opening weeks of, okay, we got to become adequate to this moment in a way we weren't the first time. Lessons learned the first time. Let's
yeah,
look within. And I, over the last 6 months, as I'm sure you have ended up in the room or in conversations with people privately, sometimes publicly, who were engaged in the kinds of spaces where that reckoning was allegedly occurring, right?
yeah.
I've gotten calls from DNC people being like, what do you think we should do? As I'm sure lots of people have. I have
Hmm.
been in like progressive movement, like on the further to the left, progressive movement gatherings about how do we rethink the movement? How do we build a
Yeah,
commanding majority? I've talked to individual Democratic leaders. I've had conversations as you have with press people. And I was sitting there on the plane thinking, if I really think back to all those rooms I was in, all those conversations I was in, the overwhelming impression of the 6 months of promised reckoning was the
Yeah.
reckoning that wasn't. No one reckoned. Everyone
Where's the
has that.
reckoning? Yeah.
Where's the reckoning? That list of characteristics, and uh, not to put too fine a point on it, but if as you may have heard in that list of traits, it struck me that whether it's a Democratic Party that refuses to look at itself, or a press that refuses to look at itself,
Yeah.
or a progressive movement that refuses to look at itself, one becomes Trump-like in one's opposition to Trump. That's
Yeah.
the risk, right? The risk of eras like this is that you become like the thing you oppose.
Yeah, it's a great piece, and it's so smart. One of the things that I fear is that the reckoning that people had was done pretty, I don't know, on the fly and not really well thought out. And the lesson that was, learned and I guess manifested itself in the early days when Trump came back into office was that people in the press and the Democratic Party should just roll over. I mean, the press, bending the knee and paying these ridiculous lawsuits. And I mean, give me a fucking break. I mean, honestly, it is just like, come on, this idea that we need to figure out how to cover this guy better and so on. He's a liar. He's a bullshit artist. He's an authoritarian wannabe. End of story. We've known this
And,
for some time. And
and he is, and his attempt to ravage this country depends on powerful and influential people believing that he is who he says he is.
yeah,
And actually, if you don't believe it and don't participate in the charade of his power, it diminishes his power.
that's
If
right.
you told me when I was, starting out in journalism and dreaming of nothing but a big job in a big place, you know, if you told me that you and I would be sitting, an ex CNN anchor, ex New York Times guy, sitting talking on our phones, and that I would feel freer and more emboldened
I do too.
to say what I think in
Sure.
this form, I wouldn't have understood what you're talking about. I would have asked what an iPhone is. But it's
Yeah.
incredible that we're now living in this moment in which
Yeah.
these big institutions are too big, too scared to be bold, in a
Yeah.
moment when boldness is the only thing that might save us.
Yeah. And there are people in the Democratic Party who are pushing back and are putting on a hell of a show right now. And I think there's a lot to be admired with some of these folks. I really like the way that Chris Murphy has been taking people to the woodshed. I mean, there are just some people I don't want to, if I start naming names, I won't name enough names and people will be mad. But I do think there's some of that out there. And I think that they just want people to, I think folks just want us, people in the media, people in Democratic circles, to have some goddamn balls and to have a goddamn spine. If balls don't count, James Carville used to have a line that if Hillary Clinton gave one of her balls to Obama, she'd still have two. So and I know maybe Hillary Clinton's not the best example, and James Carville's not the best example. People are a little fed up or whatever. I still like James, but there's a point there in that this weakness, this sort of weak need, weak tea, weak sauce approach is not going to do anything, and it's just going to embolden him, and it's just going to make matters worse.
So think about what you just said. You're absolutely right. There have been these examples, Chris Murphy, AOC, and Bernie's fighting oligarch. It's not about ideology, right? There's some progressives like AOC and Bernie have done really interesting things with this fighting
Yeah,
oligarchy tour on the progressive end. Chris Murphy, more of a historic moderate, but now saying some more progressive things. He's doing it there. You've had Cory Booker, definitely more of a moderate guy on a lot of policy issues, but really galvanizing people with that incredible filibuster performance.
yeah,
But what's interesting is, has the party noticed any of that the way we all noticed that and said, okay, let's be nimble.
yeah,
You're now in leadership tomorrow. Cory
yeah,
Booker, that was an extraordinary moment. You're in this job that you didn't have before. This
yeah.
person is no longer in leadership. You know, I
And
mean,
then Senator Booker did vote for Kushner to be the ambassador to France. I mean,
wonderful, wonderful.
I don't want to
Yeah,
start stuff, but I'm just saying, like,
no, it's real. Look, I mean, this week, we had a piece today in the Ink by Amanda Littman, who started Run for Something. And she pointed out, she said, this week where we have the Biden book, that's obviously very controversial. You have the cancer diagnosis, that's very sad.
yeah,
Um, And then you had this news of Representative Connolly from Virginia dying in office, one of like several Democrats to die in office.
Yeah.
So she pointed out that AOC, by any stretch of imagination, the most impressive, dynamic, connective Democrat of the last many
Oh,
years, had made an
very talented.
attempt, had made an attempt to get a leadership position on the oversight committee, had run against this guy Connolly, and Democrats like chose this 70-something-year-old guy who'd been there forever. No one says
Yeah.
this guy's an exciting guy. No one's interested in this guy, right?
Yeah.
The Democrats
Hell of a
literally
lawmaker
chose
in the
over her.
DC area. I will say, hell of a lawmaker in the DC area and knew how to bring home projects and serve his constituents. But go ahead. I don't
Like,
dispute
they
you.
literally chose over AOC a guy who then shortly thereafter died in office, right?
Yeah.
We wish his family well,
Yeah.
but I don't think the only way to be old when you've had a blessed career in public life is to cling and die with a gavel in your hand. I
Yeah.
think it's actually more important to die with some remove from life, to go up the mountain, to spend a little time with your grandkids if you have them, your
Well,
children.
that's
Say,
Potomac fever. The previous congressman before Jerry Connolly, or one of the previous congressmen before Jerry Connolly, was a guy named Tom Davis. I only know this because I grew up in that district. I'm a Fairfax County, Virginia native. And Tom Davis used to have a saying that the only cure for Potomac fever is embalming fluid. And there is some truth to that, and it's a truth that's stood the test of time. I mean, it's a tale as old as time here in Washington. But I do think that this moment is sort of calling for a changing of the guard. As Kennedy said, the torch needs to be passed to a new generation. And I think we're just seeing that happen in real time now. And maybe it'll happen organically, and maybe it's going to be messy, maybe it's going to be bumpy, but it needs to happen because otherwise, the folks at home are saying, you're not giving me an alternative here. I'm just going to go with the guy who tells stupid jokes, and makes wisecracks that, are probably better suited for the end of a bar somewhere.
yeah,
But
I'm not a political scientist,
yeah.
but I do believe deeply that boring the living fuck out of people is not the actual secret to winning in
It's
general,
not the
or
special
or
sauce.
defeating populist authoritarianism in particular.
Well, Anand, great to talk to you. Really appreciate it. I'm going to get to Aaron Parnas because I've got to get to. I want to get the youths involved in this. Unfortunately, Anand, we used to be the youths. We're not the
I
youths
know,
anymore.
I know. My hair stopped being the youth like 15 years ago.
As somebody who thinks I do an okay job with my hair, it's just whenever I have an Anand on, I'm like, God damn it, the hair is just. It's just.
Don't
Can
worry, it has a lot of haters.
can we
So
tone it? Can we tone it down just a little so I can't compete? This Cuban hair is trying
I
the
get I
best that
get
it
I get
can.
I get hair hate mail literally almost every day.
Oh, that's not right.
Yeah, I know.
I
It's
will.
always from bald men.
Your hair. Oh yeah, of course. Well, you could donate some and probably, win some
Yeah,
folks over.
redistribute. I
Maybe.
believe in
Yeah.
redistribution. Yeah.
All right. Good to see you, Anand. Thanks a
Good to
lot,
see
man.
you. Thank you for
All right.
having me.
All right. Great to see you. All right. Great conversation. Anand is always great. I'm going to bring in Aaron Parnas. Aaron is, I tease a little bit when I say the youths, but he is the youths. And my God, if we don't have um, young influencers like Aaron, holding us accountable here, even guys like me, we're not getting the job done here. And there's Aaron right there. Hey, how you doing, Aaron?
Hey, doing well. How are you?
Good, good, good. I was just talking to Anand, and Anand and I both thought we were hot shit when we were your age, and now we're old. Now we're just old, beat up shit. But
You're not old. You're not old. You're a youngin', Jim.
I'm trying to hang in there, man. But listen, there's so much going on. I mean, there's a couple of things I want to get to.
Yeah.
Um, I talked about the big beautiful bill blunder, whatever you want to call it, with Anand. I do want to ask you, Aaron. I mean, do young people care about the deficit? I actually cared about the deficit when I was your age. And this is going to add $2.4 trillion over 10 years to the national debt, which already exceeds $36 trillion. Because of these debt worries, mortgage prices are going up, borrowing costs are going up. That affects guys like you. You want to buy a house, your friends want to buy their first house, buy a car. It's now more expensive. I mean, what gives? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Jim, I think the basic answer here is they don't care. And the reason why is because you're talking about buying a house, right? We can't afford to buy a house, right? Because
Mm,
wages have remained stagnant for the past 30 years. Our
yeah,
student loans are are insane right now. People can't afford to live. Young people can't afford to get a good paying job or purchase their first home. So honestly, when you talk about the deficit to a young person, they're like, what the hell is that? Because at the end of
yeah,
the day, we've been talking about this big boogeyman that is the deficit for years, and well, no one's done anything to change it, right? Like
yeah.
we talk about the deficit during the Obama years, then during the Trump first, then during the Biden years. And every single time it's like, well, vote me in because I'm going to fix the deficit. And while no one's fixing the
Yeah.
deficit, and the country still seems to be operating. So young people don't really care.
Yeah, I get that. I know Bill Clinton, when he was president, he actually balanced the budget, and it was historic, and it was a big deal in Washington. He did it by raising taxes on the wealthy. I will say,
Right.
for folks who don't remember that little nugget. And what's Trump doing right now? He's exploding the deficit and cutting taxes on for the wealthy on the backs of working class Americans. And Anand made a very good point earlier. It's almost as though Trump doesn't really give a shit what his
Right.
base thinks or what they're going through or what they're about to go through, because they're going to take a hit when it comes to their health care. They're going to take a hit when it comes to inflation and borrowing costs on top of that. I mean, that's real stuff. And that is why there are people even inside the MAGA base who are saying this is going to sow the seeds of their political destruction come next year during the midterms.
Oh, for sure, 100%. But I will make one interesting point is that most people, I'm 26, right? I was
Yeah.
born in Clinton's, I guess, last year of his term. I don't
I,
remember the Clinton
I just had a heart
presidency.
attack.
I mean, it's the truth.
So have you ever watched The West Wing? Do you watch it on like,
No, I can't watch old
is it too
movies or old
corny?
TV. It just doesn't work.
Mm.
But most people my
Jack,
age, I
please
mean,
go
we
ahead.
I don't even remember the earliest presidential memory I truly remember was the first Trump election, 2016. Anything pre-2016, most folks
Yeah.
my age don't remember and don't know. So like when people are, well, Bill Clinton balanced the budget, great. I don't even remember, like I don't know where I was on 9/11. I don't like that's
Wow.
just the truth of the matter. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think this will spell the demise for Republicans in 2026 because I think that this will do what the healthcare battle in the first Trump administration really did to them when they try to cut the Affordable Care Act. I really think this is kind of the second coming to that, right? They
Yeah.
weren't able to do it then, but here I do think, I mean, for better or for worse, they will get some Medicaid cuts through. Once this
Yeah.
passes the Senate, it's just a foregone conclusion. They have the votes at this point. So I think this will do. This will spark a real big uprising, and I really think that will. Everyone talks about the blue wave every 2 years, but I really think 2026, you may actually see the blue wave that
Yeah.
everybody's been waiting for. So,
No, I think that's absolutely right. And it may start this fall.
right,
Abigail Spanberger running for governor in Virginia. And so, I mean, the bellwether elections are coming. There's no question about it.
for sure.
Um, I wanted to talk about the killing of this Israeli couple in Washington.
Yep.
The New York Times saying the slaying of two Israeli embassy aides on Wednesday outside a Jewish museum in Washington was an extreme example of what law enforcement officials and others call a global surge in anti-Semitic incidents that emerged after Hamas terrorists killed more than 1,200 people on October 7th. If you see the pictures of this young couple, they were absolutely beautiful people. Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky, forgive me if I'm not getting those names correct, are 100% correct. He was planning to propose to her
Hmm.
until after the couple they were killed by this gunman in Washington D.C. Aaron, you've been following this all day. I saw you do some reports on this earlier. Your thoughts? I mean, I think about all the young people who come to Washington who want to change the world and work on a particular interest or um, a side of the political debate that they want to work on. And when it ends in tragedy like this, it absolutely breaks my heart.
Yeah, I mean, it breaks my heart too, and I think it hits personal for me. I mean, these two were part of my community. I live in Washington D.C. I've met them. I've been in the same room as them. Um,
Really?
yeah, I mean,
Oh, I didn't know that.
they used to come to my synagogue for a number of events. They've come around, so I've seen them
I'm sorry.
before. I know they were an integral part of the community, and I will say this. I mean, I think it was an atrocity. It was horrific, and I think unfortunately, a lot of people just don't really know the facts around it really that well, right? I mean, yes, they were two staffers of the Israeli embassy, but they were attending an event at the Capital Jewish Museum, an event that had nothing to do with Israel. The event actually focused around humanitarian efforts in MENA in the Middle East and North
Mm,
Africa. And the gunmen seemed to just go there and just target anyone who was at this event at the Capital Jewish Museum. He wasn't targeting Israeli officials. He didn't even know Israeli officials were there. So it really is a horrific act of anti-Semitism. I think it really highlights how anti-Semitism has spread in our nation, around the world. I mean, I think in the same vein, I mean, no one is discounting what is happening in Gaza or in the Middle East, right? This two
yeah,
really don't have anything to do with each other here, because this was an act of anti-Semitism here in America, and I think
exactly.
it needs to be condemned unequivocally. And I'm really glad to see that folks across the political spectrum, from the left to the right and everywhere in between, have really come together here. He was actually, the gunman was actually just indicted by authorities a minute ago on multiple counts of first-degree murder. So we'll see what happens.
And so you would see them at synagogue. Can you say what they were like? They just
Not
look like lovely people. I know.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I didn't know them
Yeah,
well. Like, I've seen them
yeah,
in passing, right? I mean, they were just
yeah,
part of the overall Jewish community. But it really
yeah.
definitely hit hard. I mean, tonight we're going to have a vigil in front of the White House at 8 p.m. So if anyone's in Washington, D.C., feel free to come out.
Mm,
I'll be there just to kind of mourn their lives and remember them, because I think it's a tragic murder, and at the same time, it doesn't just touch the two of them. It touches the 15, 16 million Jews around the world, because this is
yes.
something that we've been saying for a long time, that anti-Semitism is on the rise, and if you don't stop it, if you don't call it out, it's only going to get worse. And here we are.
Yeah, their names were Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky, and you're absolutely right, Aaron. They are the latest victims in what has been a wave of anti-Semitism around the world, and it must be strongly condemned. Hate should have no home in the United States or anywhere else around the world, for that matter. It just broke my heart when I saw their story and their photos this morning and what happened here in Washington. It just absolutely breaks my heart, and I think people need to do some soul searching to make sure that these kinds of feelings of hatred are not creeping into their heart, because it just takes us to a bad place. There's just no question about it. Um, Aaron, the other thing I do want to talk about is uh, what took place at Harvard
Yeah.
earlier today. Your response to that, because what seems to be happening, in my view, is that Trump and his people are trying to suppress any idea, any notion that young people should be able to rise up in this country and protest. Obviously, people should be able to protest peacefully. They should be able to do it and respect other walks of life, other people from other walks of life, and
Yeah.
so on. But to punish Harvard in this way and say, no more international students, and those international students, by the way, need to transfer. I mean, this is going after academia.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. And I think it's interesting. It's going after academia couched in going after anti-Semitism, because
Yeah,
if this was truly about anti-Semitism, he wouldn't have just barred Harvard from enrolling Israeli students, which is exactly what he just did, right? It targets every
yeah.
single country across the globe. It doesn't just
Good point.
target Middle Eastern or Arab countries. And the reason why, the justification for this, according to Chrissy Noem, was simply because Harvard wouldn't give up disciplinary records of undocumented students to the Department of Homeland Security so that they can deport students faster. And well, here's the thing: I think Harvard will win in court. I think if you go
Yeah.
up against Harvard, get ready for a legal battle. And I'm pretty confident that this is just yet another unconstitutional act, another unlawful act in a string of unlawful acts. But I will say this: if Harvard gives in, that is a very dangerous situation. That'll open up Columbia, NYU, all these other top universities to do the same and to face the same kind of pressure from the Trump administration. So I really just hope Harvard holds strong here.
And Harvard has been holding strong. I mean, they
Yeah.
have been standing up to Trump, unlike some of these other universities. And what has taken place in Trump's, war on academia since coming back into office is that he has been successful in bullying a lot of
Yes.
other universities into submission. And a federal judge earlier today did block the Trump administration from terminating the legal statuses of international students. The immigration component of this is a huge part of this. And I was talking about this with Anand earlier, and please feel free to weigh in. I mean, this is the best kind of advertising. It's like USAID. It's some of the best advertising that the United States has. That
Yeah.
we have these gold standard universities in this country where people from around the world want to send their kids to get their education, and then they go back and they talk about what America's all about. And I mean, what America's all about these days is
Right.
maybe not the best advertisement when Trump's in power, but I mean, we still have a democratic republic at this point. And when these students come here, they were immersed in that.
He doesn't care is the issue. At the end of the day, he doesn't care. And it's not just about Harvard. It's not just about going after universities. You know this as well as I do. He's going after the free press. He's having the
Yep.
gold standard of the press capitulate to the White House. He's having the gold standard of the law firms in America that are some of the best law firms, not just in America, but around the world, capitulate to the White House. This is
Yeah.
a blatant attack on just the fundamental institutions that make America great. And if he wants to make America great again, he's really doing a bad job at it because he's dismantling everything that already makes America the greatest country in the world. So I think
Yeah.
it's a very dangerous kind of path we're on. I don't see the end, though, is the unfortunate thing, because we're now just 4 months into this administration. We still have 3 years and 8 months left. What's next? And there will be
Yeah.
something next.
That's absolutely right, Aaron. And it's so perceptive. And it brings me back to something that you said earlier that I want to peel back the onion on, which is you said that basically Trump's presidency is the first presidency that you kind of remember.
Right.
And that took my breath away when you said it. And I wanted to save that thought for the end of this conversation because that worries me greatly. And this has been on my mind for some time that young people who are coming up in this world, their base of knowledge when it comes to the American presidency is this dictator wannabe. And that is not what America is all about. That's not, I mean, we've been through a lot in this country. We've had presidents that we shouldn't be very proud of, but we've had some damn good ones. And we've had people who put the interests of the American people first.
Mm-hmm.
And when you mentioned the West Wing, I mean, I don't want to recommend any viewing, for something that goes back to yesteryear, but Martin Sheen playing Jed Bartlett is kind of what it's all about. And he was portraying a president. He was basically portraying a modern day John F. Kennedy, but putting the interests of America and America leading with the idea that right makes might. I mean, that is what I think of when I think of American greatness. And it pains me to hear you say that what you know about the American presidency is Donald Trump. That
Yeah,
scares
I
me.
mean, 100%. I mean, it's actually, I have
Yeah.
a funny anecdote about the West Wing. I got invited during President Biden's term to the White House to celebrate the West Wing for a celebration. And I went up to the actor that plays Jed Bartlett and I asked him who he played because I had no idea.
Wow.
So that was an interesting moment. But I will say it's
And we love Martin Sheen, but anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of comments about this, about how what we're living through right now is not normal. But folks, what we are living through, young people are living through, is normal for us. This is our normal, right? We don't know anything different. When